The Ugly Duckling, retold from the original by Hans Christian Andersen. Once upon a time, in the middle of the countryside, a mother duck sat, hatching out her eggs. She sat happily under the trees, surrounded by green fields and with friendly little creatures all around her. Oh, how pleasant it was out in the country that summer! As the hot summer days passed by, Mother Duck sat and sat and sat. From sunrise to sunset, she sat on her clutch of eggs. "Aren't you ever going to hatch?" she kept saying. It was a lonely time for old Mother Duck. She couldn't leave the eggs for 1 minute. How she longed to splash around in the cool waters of the pond with the other ducks. Then at last something started to happen. With an almighty crack, all the eggs opened, and the little ducks popped their heads out. "Quack, quack, quack," went Mother Duck, but she was so busy fussing over her beautiful new ducklings that she didn't notice one of the eggs hadn't hatched. A little later, old Grandmother Duck came visiting. "Look, you've forgotten one of your eggs," she told Mother Duck. Mother Duck was horrified to see one of her precious eggs sitting there all alone, waiting to be hatched, so she went straight back to the nest. Several hours later, there was still no sign of it cracking. "Let me take a close look at that egg," squawked the Grandmother Duck. "I bet it's a turkey egg. I've been fooled by that once before. Turkeys can't swim, you know. Try as I might, I tried to get a turkey into the water, but it just couldn't be done, however much I quacked and nipped it. Now let me see that egg. Ah, yes, that's a turkey egg all right. Now if I were you, I'd leave it there, and then I'd—" "Oh, be quiet, you old fool," said the Mother Duck. "This is no turkey egg. Anyway, I've sat on it for so long that it won't hurt to sit on it a little longer." Grandmother Duck ruffled her feathers and then waddled off in a huff. At last the big egg cracked. "Peep, peep," said the duck as he tumbled out. Unlike the other ducklings, he was big and ugly. "He seems very big for his age," thought the Mother Duck. "Perhaps he is a turkey after all." The next day was a glorious summer's day, so Mother Duck took all her little ducklings out for their first swim. At first their heads disappeared under the water, but soon they were swimming along perfectly well, even the Ugly Duckling. "That's no turkey, that's my own little child," said Mother Duck proudly, as she watched him swimming with the rest. When they were out of the water, Mother Duck took her little ducklings on another adventure. "Come along, my little ones," she said. "We're all going to the hen yard, where you can meet all the other animals on the farm. But stay close by me, so that no one treads on you, and look out for the cat." There was a tremendous noise when they got to the hen yard. 2 families of ducks were fighting over a slippery eel. In the end, the cat snatched it for himself. "That is the way of the world," said the Mother Duck, although she'd really have liked her own ducklings to have the eel. Soon a group of hens had gathered around. They cackled loudly and almost frightened the little ducklings out of their feathers. "Ooh, look how ugly he is," said one of them when they saw the fat little duckling. "He's not even the right color," said another. Then the turkey gobbled at him until his face turned scarlet. "Just leave him alone," cried Mother Duck. He'd been bitten, gobbled at, and insulted, and by now he didn't know where to turn. Even his sisters and brothers started being horrible to him. Then, to his dismay, Mother Duck turned against him. The little duckling couldn't take any more. He decided to leave home for good. Far, far away he flew, until he came to a swamp where the wild ducks lived. They were fascinated by the odd little creature. "What kind of a bird do you call yourself?" they asked. The Ugly Duckling said nothing. He simply bowed in all directions, for he was trying to be polite. He desperately wanted them to like him. "You are ugly," said the wild ducks, "but that doesn't worry us too much, as long as you don't try and marry into our family." The Ugly Duckling wasn't thinking of marriage. All he wanted was to be able to swim among the reeds and drink water when he was thirsty. "Listen, my friend," they said, "we've never seen anyone quite as ugly as you, and we quite like you for it. Not far away are some lovely young wild geese who are not married. They love to meet anyone who's a bit, unusual. Why don't you come with us and meet them?" But before he had a chance to follow them, bang, bang! 2 shots had just been fired, and the smell of gun smoke hung in the air. The wild ducks flew away, and the ugly duckling was all alone. It was the duck hunting season, and big, fat hunters were on the lookout for fat, juicy ducks. Soon the whole swamp was surrounded by hunters. The awful noise of gunshots came from every direction. Some hunters had hidden behind the bushes, some were among the tall reeds, and others sat on the long, low branches that stretched out over the swamp. The duckling was terrified. He tucked his head under his wing, hoping that they wouldn't notice him. One of the hunters had a ferocious-looking dog. The dog's tongue hung out of its mouth, and its eyes glistened. It noticed the ugly duckling, but then, with a great splash, it leapt out of the way. It hadn't touched a single feather on the duckling's back. "I am so ugly that even the dog doesn't want to bite me," sighed the duckling. Then he ran for cover, while the shots whistled through the reeds. Late that afternoon, the shooting finally stopped. He was so afraid that he waited for many hours until he dared take his head out from under his wing. Then, when he thought it was safe, he ran out of the swamp. Across the fields and the meadows he went, but the wind was strong, and he had to battle through it. Eventually he came to a little hut. There was a little crack in the side, so he squeezed himself through. Once inside, he met an old woman who lived with her cat and hen. The old woman loved the cat and the hen as if they were her own children. Now, this old woman was so busy talking to her pets that she didn't notice the duckling at first. And even when she did see him, her eyesight was so bad that she thought he was a fully grown duck. "What a stroke of luck," she said. "Now we shall have duck eggs and never go hungry. Let's give it a try." So the duckling was allowed to stay for 3 weeks, but in all that time he laid no eggs. The hen and the cat were tired of his constant chattering, so they told the mistress to get rid of him. "Can you lay eggs?" asked the old woman. "No," the duckling told her. "He's useless," laughed the cat and hen. The duckling was so hurt by these harsh comments that he went into a corner of the room and stayed there for the rest of the afternoon. Oh, how he longed to be out there now, splashing about in the clear waters of a little pond. He was so excited at the thought of being outside that he couldn't stop talking about it. "What's come over you?" said the hen. "You talk utter nonsense. Lay eggs or purr, and such ridiculous ideas will soon disappear. But you just don't know how lovely it is, being able to float in water and diving down to the bottom of a lake and getting your head wet." "You're mad," said the hen. "Ask the cat whether he likes swimming or diving down to the bottom of the lake. Better still, ask the old woman. Ask her if she'd like to float in water and get her head wet." "You just don't understand me," said the duckling. "I'm going out into the wide world, whatever you say." He'd just about had enough of sitting on the nest with no eggs, so off he went. Summer was a lonely time for the ugly duckling. He swam in the water, he dived down and got his head wet, but the other ducklings didn't want to know him. Autumn came. The leaves fell from the trees, the wind howled, and the ugly duckling was still all alone in the world. Autumn turned into winter, and what a cold, cold winter it was. The duckling settled himself in a village pond, but he had to keep swimming round and round in the cold water to stop it from freezing up. Every day the pond seemed to be getting smaller and smaller. The duckling had to swim with all his might to prevent the last bit of water from turning to ice. But soon he was too tired to swim any more, so the ice closed in on him, and he was stuck fast. The next morning a kind farmer broke the ice and freed the helpless duckling. He tucked the shivering creature under his arm and took him home to his wife. "There, there, little fellow," she said, and she sat him in front of their wonderful blazing fire. He was happy sitting by the fire, thawing out and thinking about things, but the farmer's children treated him like a new toy and chased him round the farmhouse. On one occasion he flapped his wings so hard that he flew right into the milk pail. From there he flew into a big bowl of butter and then into a barrel of flour. What a sight he looked! The children laughed so much that they almost fell on top of one another trying to catch him. Luckily for the duckling, the door was open, so he got out of the house and found a hiding place under some bushes in the fresh snow. Once again he was out on his own. in the snow, unloved and unnoticed by anyone. For most of the winter he lay so still that there was hardly any life left in him by springtime. At last the snowdrops appeared. Spring had arrived, so he spread his wings and went on his travels. As he flew high in the sky, everything beneath him looked so green and beautiful. He landed in a large garden where the apple trees were in blossom and the crocuses created a carpet of purple and gold. In the middle of the garden was a large pond, and this was where the little duckling made his home. The little duckling was swimming happily along when he saw 4 elegant swans coming to meet him. They gently ruffled their feathers and floated lightly on the water. Soon the swans were very close to him. "They're so beautiful," he thought, "but alas, I know they will peck me to death when they see how ugly I am. Still, it would be better to be killed by them than to be nipped by ducks, picked by hens, or frightened to death by the farmer's children." As they glided even closer, he cried, "Kill me, kill me," and bent his head. But nothing happened, and just as the duckling was about to lift his head, he noticed his reflection in the water. And what did he see there? It certainly wasn't what he expected to see. It was his own reflection, but he was no longer an awkward, clumsy grey bird. "That beautiful bird can't be me," he cried. The ugly duckling had turned into a lovely, elegant swan. It didn't matter any more that he'd been born in a humble place. What mattered now was that he'd been hatched from a swan's egg. In fact, he was almost happy that he'd suffered so much hardship, because it made him appreciate the beautiful garden that was all around him even more. The other swans swam in a circle around him. They craned their long, elegant necks and caressed him with their beaks. "Welcome, your highness." He was hailed as the king of the swans. Later that day, some children were playing out in the garden. They had brought bread with them to feed the swans. The youngest child shouted, "Look, there's a new one." And when all the other children saw the beautiful new swan, they clapped their hands and ran to tell their parents. Lots of pieces of cake and bread were thrown into the water for the swans, and all agreed that the new swan was the most beautiful of them all. The end.